Morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have often talked about corruption, and tonight we would like to revisit that subject. The cartoon we have in front of us there is one that says poor and rich. I think I would have put the title as The New Rich and Rich, because corruption in our part of the world usually has created this new rich and they flaunt their wealth in the most extravagant ways. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers.
What do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is the new normal, especially when it comes to Zimbabwe. No, it reminds me of a discussion we had, and one of our viewers was actually shocked to say, how does somebody end up spending, you know, millions on just a house, you know, and usually, like I said, when the money is ill-gotten, you don't really care about the price tag to it. You just want to have it. You don't need it, but you just want to have it. And you don't have anything better to spend on. I'll give you an example. Uh, Wicknell would go into, would see a car online and want maybe a car from Germany, a Mercedes. And to him, picking up a car or making a choice out of the fleet that is being advertised is so difficult. He would rather take three of them, different colors, and he'll tell you, I couldn't make up my mind because the colors were all beautiful. That's a level of corruption. You know, if you're not corrupt and your money is hard earned, I'm sure that choice would come naturally. You know, I would also draw another example. Like how the white farmers were long back. You know, simple khaki shorts. You know, and safaris, his farmer shoe, socks, and that's him for the day. In and out, even in town, his farm and everything. That is a normal lifestyle. But then, how we have gotten to where, again, I'll give you an example of who will buy a watch for 10,000 plus. The same time will be told by somebody that has got a simple watch. And, that level of corruption would get you to normalize abnormal, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you haven't earned the money, it's almost like you don't care. All you want to do is spend the money, and I think the temptation there is you want to prove that you are rich, and the best way to them is being extravagant, and so they end up spending astronomical sums of money on something just to show off. It is a crazy idea. But let's just look at how corruption started in Zimbabwe. I would say corruption started way back soon after independence. Here is Dr. Simbamakon explaining how corruption started in Zimbabwe.
I recall very clearly that when we came into office in 1980, we inherited Ian Smith's systems. And Ian Smith's ministers drove Peugeot 504s. They drove themselves from home to work in their Land Rovers and all in kinds. Most of them were farmers. They parked their Land Rover and then they used the government vehicle when they were at work with a chauffeur. When they finished at night, they packed them and they took theirs to go home. Within the month of our coming into office, Prime Minister Mugabe then directed that every minister be issued with an E-class Mercedes-Benz. And the Peugeot 504s were retired to permanent secretaries, and the deputy ministers who then took over. We can also look at many other things, small they may appear at the time. Let me hazard that even at that point, Enos Nkala was our Minister of Finance. I don't think we knew what budget we inherited from Ian Smith when the decision was taken to buy those E-class fleets for the ministers. So the material affection for material things has always been with us. And the differentiation also, even going back into the camps, zwe mashefu nezwe my comrades makada were not the same. So much so that even today, when the so-called Minister for Presidential Affairs or Provincial Governor, as they were, goes to Bubi or Binga, they will be served separately and differently from the other people. The avarice grew as we began to exploit the opportunities of office. When I was in the government, the minister was allocated one vehicle that they kept, which was the sedan they used in town. If you needed to go off-road, then your ministry hired off-road vehicles from the CMED, and you were charged for it. Now a minister will have an average of 4 vehicles in his forecourt, all at government's expense.
So the leadership modeled the wrong kind of behavior, and that kind of behavior permeated all across our society. Our CEOs, like you're saying, heads of parastatals and so forth, modeled from the top.
Indeed. Indeed. I made a passing reference that we have CEOs who will buy themselves a luxury car when they can't pay wages at the end of the week or end of the month. This has been so entrenched in our psyche, this showing off, as if you are a different person. You're breathing different air from those who don't drive Prados and Land Cruisers, from those who don't drive Jeep Cherokees. We have lost our humanity. There's lots of reference to Ubuntu, very farcical, superficial, not coming from the heart. We have changed.
There we have it. We have changed. I think greed in our part of the world has become such a big issue. I think one of the most worrying thing about it is that once you have started it, it's very difficult to stop. What do you think?
Yeah, it becomes like a cancer. It's very, very difficult to stop it. Or practically it becomes a habit. Once it becomes a habit or you're addicted to it, it's very difficult to stop. And I like what you were talking about, to say it starts with leadership. I'll give you a practical example. One of our councils, of our cities, I won't say which one, was not able to pay, their, the lower employees their basic salaries for quite some time. But you find out that, the employees will still go to work. And if you ask yourself, how does somebody go to work and they're not getting paid? To me, if I was not getting paid, I wouldn't go at all, right? But now if you look closely, there is activities that council does, like, people paying car parks and so forth, and burial grounds and everything. Those same individuals that are not getting paid have decided to go about paying themselves out of, for example, car parks. You find those guys there that we call them the guys that clamp cars. If you go there and you tell him, I'm parking here for an hour or two, instead of paying the full fare, you give him maybe $1, he will accept it, right? That is corruption in its rightful place. You know what I mean? That is corruption. So the moment high office decides to pleasure themselves and not do the right thing by the lower guys or the lower employees, they will take it upon themselves to go about it the wrong way and try and make ends meet for themselves. And there you have already started a rot. You've already started a cancer. And for you now to stop them to say, no, I'm going to pay you this month. So please, guys, let's not go about, doing the backdoor things. It's very difficult because now they are used to it. I'll give you another example. I mean, right now we have all these tender gates that are happening, scandals. You find that at the top is either a minister, and unfortunately in Zimbabwe, the president is always brought forward as the main guy, the number one. It becomes very difficult for you to stop the younger ones from being corrupt, especially when they know that they are dealing with you. You are the source. And now we get to a place where Zimbabwe is full-blown corruption out in the open. Nobody needs to hide it. They've actually come up with a word for it, kungwava, mixing kuba and I don't know what other word. That is the level of corruption that we have gotten to. It started in 1980, and look, throughout the years, it grew. You had small scandals, big scandals here and there. They were fast-paced. Now it's every single day. From what I heard, Minister of Finance has just lost 2 billion. It's less than a year. How many scandals have we had? Have we talked about, especially even on this channel? It's almost at a weekly base. That is the level of rot that we have gotten ourselves into now. And it's going to be very difficult to stop it because it is the new normal. It's the way of going about things if you want to survive in Zimbabwe. That will be the excuse to justify this level of corruption. And it's not only in the government. It's all over, even in the opposition. All of them are equally just as corrupt. As you can see from the picture there, they got dangled 40,000. For those that don't know, there's the $40,000 loans. And recently, they got given another 70,000 for cars. But what is their job in the first place? Corruption leads you to an extent to say, you go begging for food aid, but you can buy each and every one MP a new car worth 70,000. and your people are dying.
I think one of the sad realities of the corruption in our part of the world is that the those who are corrupt, they are looting and wasting the money. It's not as if they are looting and then investing that found wealth. They are not. And in most cases, some of them are taking it outside the country. In other words, the country is not benefiting from it. So you find it's quite common to hear of some of these leaders, particularly when they finally get out of office, to hear that they had salted away billions of dollars outside the country, buying assets, houses, and things like that. And so the country is being starved of the wealth that it should have for the good of all. But the other aspect, which I think should also be considered here, is how some of this loot has made the leaders themselves, people like Mnangagwa there, incredibly rich. And so they've been able to bribe everybody else and thus corrupt every state institution to the point of they've become ZANU-PF departments in all but name. If you look at the judiciary, I mean, the bribe we're talking about there was paid to the MPs in November 2022 in preparation for the coming elections in the following year, 2023. And by the time the elections came round, Mnangagwa, having silenced the MPs and senators and these ministers and deputy ministers with their respective bribes, he started spending money as if there's no tomorrow, bribing judges, chiefs, church leaders. In a normal, healthy democracy, those in positions of power, MPs, would have been the ones who've been asking, where is this money coming from? But since they'd already been bribed, their voices silenced, it is widely believed that Mnangagwa could have spent a cool $5 billion on bribes alone last year's elections. That's how terrible the situation has become. I think that is one of the tragedies of corruption, particularly in a third world country like Zimbabwe. I don't know what you want to give your closing remarks there, Ben.
Sure, thanks. So, in closing, once you partake of ill-gotten, finances, like you said, it becomes very difficult for you to then ask questions to say, but what happened to the money that was meant for this? They can easily just tell you, but some of it we gave it to you and you haven't yet paid it back. That way you're silenced. You got nothing else to say. Lest you trouble the waters and then you end up having to pay back that money. This is why you find we have such a weak opposition. It's because they are part and parcel of it. And until we realize this is what is happening, they will get away scot-free each and every time. Of course, the opposition has to say something. They cannot, keep quiet. They will say on their, Twitter handles and Facebook, whatever. That's as far as it goes, such that they don't rock the boat too hard, lest they fall in as well. Because if everybody is to get audited, that is in, some of these offices, I am telling you, a vast amount of wealth will not be accountable for. This is why you also find they cannot invest in Zimbabwe. Where did you get the money from? Show us how you make your wealth, and you can't. So, the best thing is to offshore it. And at the end of the day, you're offshoring the hard and, currency that even the country also needs desperately for it to survive till tomorrow. So corruption is not something that, we can just easily just forget or say today and, forget about it. It's something that is destroying Zimbabwe, and that is the number one cause of why we have such a poor economy, an economy that is not functioning, an economy that is just surviving, barely. So unless we have, the only way is we need to get an opposition that is not as equally corrupt as the ruling. This is the only way where we can actually have a voice to demand. The ones that are there are already compromised. That is the truth. If we cannot see that, then I believe we are doomed to be where we are for a very, very, very long time. That's what I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ben. I think I'll just give the closing remark to this gentleman talking about how the corrupt leaders in Africa are sucking the wealth out of the continent.
Africa's politics have fallen into the hands of elites, as these people just do what the colonialists did, which was suck the wealth out and shift it overseas. World Bank says between 60 and 70% of Africa's capital shifted out of the continent. It's in banks in Europe. So there's this mentality which I think has allowed a very small group of people to take over those countries politically, but also economically. And until that changes, that is, until there's a new generation or even a revolution that actually takes power back to African people, I think those problems, that lack of development, will continue.
And we know that is very true. And unfortunately, until we change our politics, we cannot address problems like corruption and mismanagement. And that is the problem with Africa. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you very much again, Ben, and have a good night.